What's the story? You all know the story because this is the Passover story. This is the Ten Commandments. This is Charlton Heston and Yul Brynner. Okay? This is Prince of Egypt. This is, who was in Prince of Egypt? Val Kilmer and Ray Fiennes, right. Okay, good. See, you're very good. That's it, good. That was excellent. That was really good. All right, so what's happening is we have Pharaoh. Who is Pharaoh? Yeah, yes, I know he's Yul Brynner, but... Now, let me stop and say something about Pharaoh as Yul Brynner. The Bible is a text, and as a text, it leaves you the opportunity to imagine the physiognomy of a character, okay? Good morning. When we read, we make a picture in our minds of what a character looks like. Now, the wonderful thing about that is that you are allowed, as you're reading, to adjust that character, to think of different pictures in your mind. Because the physiognomy, the physical appearance of a character bespeaks a certain quality of the character. That's why a director or a casting director in a film has such a difficult job, because I'm looking for the person whose look really captures the notion, the nature of the character. I'll give you a silly, quick, first of all, I mean, the great example is Judy Garland is Dorothy, right? Audrey Hepburn could not have been Dorothy. So anybody even know what that sentence means? You're old like me. Okay? Let me give you a more modern version. You seen La La Land? You haven't seen La La Land yet? Go see it. It's very cute. It's very cute. Emma Stone plays the heroine, right? And Emma Stone carries a certain innocence and a certain girlishness to the part because she looks the part, right? Had Scarlett Johansson would not have been as good in that part, although there's nothing wrong with Scarlett Johansson. I just want that on record, okay? If anybody knows Miss Johansson and knows that she's looking for a synagogue, please. Okay? You know, I mean, God was in a good mood the day Scarlett Johansson was created. So the character looks like something. Now, if I give you Yul Brynner as Pharaoh, Pharaoh is evil. But what kind of evil is suggested by Yul Brynner? Now, first of all, one of the problems with movies is that any character you see, it reminds you, any actor you see, reminds you of all the other parts that actor ever played. So whatever Yul Brynner is ever in, he is the king of Siam. It does, even in the Magnificent Seven, when he's riding around the West, he's still, I am the king of Siam, right? These are my children, number one child. You remember the king of Siam? So even if he's Pharaoh in Egypt, he is the king of Siam. And the other thing about Yul Brynner is he doesn't own a T-shirt. Right? Every movie he is in, you see that magnificent chest. What a great chest. I mean, my God, what a wild... I mean, What? Almost like Putin, right? Oh. You're trying to distract me again. I'm trying to stay out of politics, and then you're pushing me back. We'll get to that in a minute. Did you see the cold opening of Saturday Night Live last week? If you haven't seen it, Google it. It's wonderful. So here is Yul Brynner. And Yul Brynner is this magnificent, and he has, you know, the bald head with the little ponytail. You know, and so he represents a kind of evil. What kind of evil does he represent? His physiognomy, his physical character. What does he represent? It's what? But it's power. He is evil in your face. He is a powerful, self-possessed evil. He is afraid of nothing. Evil, right? Now, if you read, as we're going to read the narrative now, I'm going to ask you whether that's really the narrative that the Bible's presenting, or whether or not we might actually have a different kind of evil here. What about an evil that isn't so sure of itself? A little man on a big throne, an insecure evil, an evil that's reaching above himself, trying to make his, you know, he's faking it, in other words. And he's doing, and when you're faking it, it's, you know, right, it's not authentic. He's reaching beyond himself. And so you end up with not that kind of evil, but an insecure evil. No, shut up. No, but what would an insecure evil look like? Who would represent an insecure? How about an evil which is slimy, sneaky, not in your face, but sneaky kind of evil? Edward G. Robinson is in the movie, but he plays Dathan, right? But he could be that kind of evil. Well, I haven't got to Charlton Heston. I'm about to get to him. I'm doing evil first because it's easier. We'll get to good in a minute. Give me an actor who plays small man playing big part evil. Joe Pesci, right? You talking to me? You have any idea who I am? Right? What? Peter Lorre. He's also in the movie, I think, right? Right. You want to leave Egypt, you know? What? What makes you think you want to leave Egypt, you know? Danny DeVito. Jack Nicholson. Now, I mean, seriously, Jack Nicholson plays evil. What does it look like? Think of The Shining, right? It's a very different kind of evil than Charlton Heston's evil. Do you see what I'm trying to say? The character that you put into your imagination. That's why, by the way, reading is a lot more fun, really, to construct a story than watching the film, because the film gives you the director's idea of what the character is. When you read, you're the director. You can have 1,000 different images of the character all at once. Like one of the saddest things is you buy a book and there's a picture on the cover, you know, like paperback, because that's the way you always imagine the character. You've lost the freedom to construct the character with multiple faces. So a Danny DeVito, a Peter Lorre, an Edward G. Robinson, a Jack Nicholson evil is a very different kind of evil than Charlton Heston, right? Now, what I want you to do as we read the text is to tell me which one fits best. When you read Pharaoh, this is the text we're about to read is a meditation on good and evil. It's a meditation on the confrontation between good and evil. Fundamentally, it's going to say two basic religious ideas which become the core of the Jewish orientation to the world. The first idea is evil exists. Evil exists. Pharaoh is not misunderstood. He's not a good guy who's made a few mistakes. There is evil in the world. This is a truth. The second idea is it must be confronted and defeated. And how you confront it and defeat it is what the meditation is about. And it can be defeated. That's the great faith of the Bible, right? So when you think about Pharaoh, think about the character. Now, let's switch to good. So we have Charlton Heston, right? Charlton Heston, American actor, right? You know, and again, Charlton Heston is all the parts that he ever played. They all get assimilated. And he gives you this sort of in-your-face good, right? He also doesn't own a T-shirt. I mean, he's Ben-Hur. He's always Ben-Hur. You expect him to be on a chariot, you know, and you say, oh, now I know where he belongs, right? Charlton Heston, right? And what kind of goodness is Charlton Heston? Square-jawed, blue-eyed, powerful. The Bible says Moshe was Anav Mikol Ish, the most humble of all men. And when we read the bush story, the burning bush story, Moses 5 times says to God, I don't want to go. You get a deep insecurity in Moses, a man who's been put into a mission that he believes is bigger than himself, that he shouldn't be in. A man who's reaching himself to try to find that voice in himself, and really doesn't find it till the end of the Torah, to find that voice of goodness within himself, and keeps retreating from the thing. So you have a reticent Moses, a humble Moses, meeting a very different kind of Pharaoh. Who would we cast? Go ahead. Jimmy Stewart as, okay, so Jimmy Stewart, or the modern version of Jimmy Stewart is Tom Hanks. So Jimmy Stewart or Tom Hanks as Moses he's good through and through. He's shorter, is that what you said? He has to be shorter, she says, right? Right, you can't have a 6'2" Moses, right? You know? Okay, who else would you do? I mean, what about, for just a moment, for the fun of it, how about a Nebuchadnezzar Moses? Woody Allen. So in Steve's version of the movie, this is why it never sold, it was Woody Allen as Moses and Danny DeVito as Pharaoh. That could work. I mean, Albert Brooks. Al Pacino. See, Al Pacino, in many of his movies, plays this sort of wounded, righteous guy, right? You know, it has this big speech at the end, right? A lot of his movies have speeches at the end where he comes out, you know, and the one where he's a lawyer and the Scent of a Woman, all these movies where he has these big speeches at the end. Al Pacino, Serpico, right? All these movies where he's the wounded good man. So you have Al Pacino as Moses and Jack Nicholson as Pharaoh. How's that? Oh. Hoo-ah. Yeah. Right. Or keep thinking. I mean, this is exactly the point. What does good look like? Is good always self-assured? Is good always sure of itself? You see, if you represent goodness, does part of your mind saying, "What am I doing here?" Is goodness by necessity compromised when it becomes public? That is to say, goodness doesn't want to take credit for what it's doing. I don't want to be the one out. I want to get this done and get the hell out of here. Because to want to be the hero, is already a fault. That's hubris. So you have this interesting, that's exactly the point. How does it look? What does it look like, right? Yeah, please.
If you remove evil,
yeah.
is good left?
Well, that's the question. So these two, what's interesting is, of course, Moses grows up in the household of Pharaoh, right? The Pharaoh he's confronting now is not the Pharaoh who condemned him to death as a baby. It's the successor, presumably his son. So if that's his son, this is theoretically his uncle, right? Because he was rescued by the princess of Egypt. So that would make Moses' stepmother the sister of the Pharaoh. This is an uncle. They're mishpacha. This is a family fight as well, right? I mean, one of the interesting questions which the Torah doesn't deal with is, when Moses talks to Pharaoh, what language are they talking in? Nah. What language are they talking in? Egyptian. How does Moses know Egyptian? He grew up in the palace. He knows the ways of the palace. He knows the protocol. He knows how to get things done in the administration because he grew up there. That's still a part of him. And part of the question is he conflicted? At any point does he say, "What am I doing here?" Yes, David? We don't know. Presumably Egyptian. I mean, maybe Hebrew, but Hebrew at that time was undeveloped. It was a very proto-language, right? What we know as Hebrew didn't develop until a little bit later. But it could be Egyptian as well. Yes, that. Well, you know, Mark's thesis, which I think was really well argued last week, which is so interesting, is Mark's thesis is that Moses doesn't know he's Jewish. See, we assume that he knows he's Jewish from the beginning of the story, and that his dual identity, slave, prince, right, Jewish, Egyptian, is part of the drama of the story. That's what I presented last week. He's Oscar Schindler trying to figure out which side he's on. Okay? Would you rather be a sparrow or a snail, a hammer or a nail? It's a great Jewish philosopher named Paul Simon once sang that, right? The question Mark suggested, Rabbi Gelman suggested, that he doesn't even know who he is, that this is a part of his coming to identity. And the reason he doesn't circumcise his sons is because he doesn't know he's Jewish. And it isn't until he's on his way back to Egypt to confront Pharaoh that he accepts the fact that he's Jewish, and that's where the circumcision drama comes in. Yeah, well, there's a very weird scene. There's a half a dozen really weird scenes in the Bible that are throwbacks to mythological, very strange mythological scenes that we don't understand because we don't understand the mythological language being debated here, but that's one of the scenes. The scene is that God comes to kill Moses in the middle of the night, and what happens is the wife takes the son, circumcises the son, throws the foreskin at the demon that's come to kill him, and saves his life. Okay? If there ever was a Freudian nightmare, there it is. Like the night before your son's bris. That's your nightmare, right? But it's such a weird story. It's obviously a strange mythological throwback that got included in the text because it meant something to the editors, to the writers, and I can't explain it to you. The classical commentators say that God wanted him to circumcise his son to protect the son from the demons of Egypt, and that the wife understood this even though he didn't. It's a weird, 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 weird story. All right, let's pick it up. We all together? Everybody okay so far? Any questions? We have our movie cast now. We ready? No? You don't like the movie? You don't like my movie? Ryan Gosling as Moses and... Yeah. There can be miracles if you eat cheese. Val Kilmer. Yeah. Yes. Yes. No, I'll tell you what he did. I showed you last week there was a big white spot. The Bible doesn't tell you anything about Moses' upbringing. It gives you his birth story, and then it says after that, and it gives you his adult story. The upbringing of Moses is skipped over by the Bible. So Jeffrey Katzenberg bought that. He bought the rights to the untold story, and he filled it in with midrash. And he fills in this midrash that the young Ramses, that's played by Ray Fiennes, and the Moses is played by Val Kilmer, the voices, become close personal friends. And that's part of the drama, is that there's a closeness between the two of them that then gets turned into hate. And that that love gets turned into hate. And when love gets turned into hate, it carries a passion which you cannot imagine. That's part of the story, Sandy. You get it? Yeah. See, there too, so that's an animated film. Sorry? Yeah, she's just reflecting on the Prince of Egypt, the animated film that Jeffrey Katzenberg made at DreamWorks many years ago. And there too, I had a little role in this, okay? They invited lots of clergy people and teachers, religious teachers, to see the movie as it was being made, to prevent them from making any egregious mistakes. So first I got to see it early when it was in rushes, and then I got to see it almost before it was finished. And I made all kinds of comments, and I actually met Katzenberg. I'm sure he'll remember that. So he walks around and goes, I met Feinstein, maybe I'll make another movie so I can meet him again. And it was interesting because there were things about it, like in the movie, the Pharaoh at the beginning of the story, the guy who enslaves us, is voiced by Patrick Stewart, who at the time was Captain Picard on Star Trek. Now, first of all, Patrick Stewart has this beautiful British voice, and he was Captain Picard. He was the captain of the Enterprise, which to me is holy. I mean, I'm a Star Trek fan, So, and I kept saying to him, like, you've put the most benign leader voice, and he's a Nazi. I mean, he's a terrible Nazi. He's a horrible, and so I had that argument with Katzenberg. He didn't like that either. I mean, they already paid Patrick Stewart $1 zillion to do this, and here's this rabbi guy telling him, I want someone with a horrible voice, I want someone mean. And then the big question that they had, the last question, they just brought me back just before the movie was finished, because they had a real problem. You know what the real problem was? They finished the whole movie except one scene, the burning bush. And the problem with the burning bush is, what should be God's voice? What should be God's voice? So my first response was like all of you. I was James Earl Jones. I am your father, Luke Skywalker. That works. He said, yeah, that would be easy. And then he said, but we want, we have feminists. So I said, okay, Kathleen Turner, Because as far as I'm concerned, Kathleen Turner is as close to the Lord God as I ever need to get. And that didn't work out either. And then they had this idea of having a chorus of voices, because it would be male, female, and young and old. And that didn't work because the whole story is about monotheism. So in the end, what they did was something very clever, which is exactly the same thing that Cecil B. DeMille did. There is a midrash that asks the exact same question. A midrash, a 2nd, 3rd century rabbi asked the question, how did Moses know it was God's voice talking to him from the burning bush? because Moses had never heard God's voice before. How would you know it's God's voice? And the answer is that he heard his father's voice calling to him. And then there's a gloss on that which says not his father's voice, but his own voice. His own voice. Now, for the Midrash, what does that mean? To hear your father's voice or to hear your own voice is the voice of conscience, the voice of conscience. So revelation for the rabbi of the Midrash of the 2nd century becomes the voice of conscience. That is, you're called at a certain moment to become the person you're meant to be. And sometimes you resist, but that voice is irresistible. And the voice of conscience is at the same time immanent and transcendent. That is, it's part of you, but it really is outside of you in some way. It calls upon you. It is a critique or a motivation that comes from outside. So that's the voice, right? So when Cecil B. DeMille made the movie, that's what they did. The voice of God in the movie 10 Commandments is Charlton Heston's voice, but slowed down 1 octave. They had the technology to do that back then. And Katzenberg did the exact same thing. He has Val Kilmer, who plays Moses, also is the voice of God. And that was the answer to the Midrash. Does that make sense? Which is a very interesting kind of question. Okay, good. Yes, please.
Real quickly, did anybody else have trouble with Yul Brynner being Jewish and Charlton Heston being WASP or anything?
Yul Brynner's not Jewish, is he?
I thought he was.
No, he's Mongolian, I think.
Oh, thanks for that. And also about you said, did anybody else play? I was always told this. Can anybody?
Apparently he's a very nice guy, but I mean,
Can
you know.
anybody else play Dorothy? And MGM, I read, tried to trade Clark Gable and Carol Lombard to Fox for Shirley Temple to play it originally.
Shirley Temple to play in Wizard of Oz?
'Cause she was
Oy. Yeah, that I wouldn't know. See, this is Hollywood, Hollywood Insider. Yes, please. Yeah. Yeah. He's a dictator. He's in Taxi. He's a dictator. He's. Of course, he's a buffoon. So is Pharaoh in a certain way. No, but that's the point. I mean, so give me another good bad guy. No, don't. You people, Jesus. You. Sorry? Okay, but that's the point. I mean, so I'm trying to think, because a character not only carries his past roles, his physiology, his physical appearance suggests something to you. And characters, if they're really good actors, have an ability to project character from, through their faces. I mean, the great test of acting is if you could turn the sound off the movie and still understand what's going on, because that's what great actors are able to do, right? Yeah, well, he'd have a gun. I mean, that would be the difference. All right, let's take a look. Let's take a look inside. All right, so we okay? So here's the end of the story as it finished last week. This is a 4-part story, okay? There are 4 Torah portions, 4 weekly Torah portions that describe the story of the enslavement and the liberation of the people of Israel. Last week, we were enslaved in about 3 verses. The rest of it really is the process of liberation, which is the confrontation between God and Pharaoh, which is the confrontation between good and evil. And the question is, how does that confrontation work? And if you think about what really is being asked there, it's a profoundly important question, okay? The profoundly important question is, does God have an interest? Does the God that we worship have an interest in human history? And how does God work out God's plans in human history? And where am I in that drama? And if there's evil ruling the world, what can I expect? What can I do to confront it? How do you confront evil? How do you change the world if the world betrays the egotism, the arrogance of a ruler who is so evil, who worships himself? How does that work? How do you do that? And the story here is going to be, in some ways, rather fantastical. That is to say, this isn't a news report. Okay, this is a fantasy. And it's a fantasy created by a very weak people confronting a very powerful evil. And when I was a little kid and got beat up in gym class because I was small and fat and helpless and vulnerable. So I had fantasies of one day learning karate and beating up my tormentors. The victim always has the fantasy of coming back and smashing the victimizer. And the 10 plagues narrative really reflects that sort of thing. But it's a very sophisticated version of that fantasy. But it also contains a great deal of insight into what it means to confront evil. So let's see where we end up, and let's begin the confrontation. You ready? Afterwards, Moses and Aaron went and said to Pharaoh, "Thus says the Lord God of Israel, let my people go," on page 338, "that they may celebrate a festival for me in the wilderness." So the request was never, let us go forever. It was just, let us go worship our God, which is something that a pagan king would normally have to accede to, because a pagan king would accede to the god of the slaves, right? But Pharaoh said, who is this Lord? Now, the problem is the Lord is a noun in English, but right now the name of God is stuck in there. Like if you put in Yahweh or, God as a name, as a proper name, who is this Yahweh, as it were, or however it's pronounced, that I should listen to him and let Israel go? So Pharaoh thinks of himself as a god, and they come in the name of his alternative god and say, we want to go worship our God. And Pharaoh says, well, who's he? Who's he? I don't know this God, nor will I let Israel go. And that's going to be the thing. I don't know this God. Why don't I know this God? There's a simple reason you don't know this. Gods are local. If you live in Egypt, you don't know who the gods of Canaan are. They don't live here. They rule Canaan. Gods are local. That's an ancient idea. That's the idea of paganism. You show up in Encino and say you worship the god of Reseda. You don't know who that god is. Maybe we heard of it because we're not far from Reseda. But why we in Encino should worry about the god of Reseda is beyond us. Right? You see the thing? He says, I know this God. Okay? There's a wonderful midrash that says that he has these guys, that Egypt was like the world capital of this sort of stuff. So he has his God chroniclers go look up in the Encyclopedia of Gods if anyone's ever heard of this God. See, the Jewish conceit is our God is the God of the whole world. That was a crazy idea. No one ever had that idea before. Gods were local and gods were national. Right? God was tribal. This is the God of the Egyptians. And he belongs here. You go to Canaan, you worship the Canaanite gods. You go to Rome, you worship like a Roman. This idea that there's one God for the whole world? What? That's ridiculous. So this God shows up, and he says, we want to worship our God. It's like this, but he's not here. What do you need to worship him for? And they answered, the God of the Hebrews. Now, Hebrews is what non-Jews call Jews. Okay? The God of the Hebrews has manifested himself to us. Let us go, we pray, distance of 3 days in the wilderness to sacrifice to the Lord our God, lest he strike us with a pestilence or sword. Somebody tell me the answer to this question, because I can't figure it out. Rabbi Sachs wrote his commentary this week, and I thought he did a dreadful job. Why doesn't Moses say, we're leaving? Instead, he tells them, we want to go 3 days, worship this God, and we'll come back. He's lying. Why is he lying? Hold on to that thought for a moment. No, he doesn't say we're coming back. But it's sort of, you don't say I'm going to the store without saying I'm coming back, right? No, you're right. But the king of Egypt said to them, Moses and Aaron, why do you distract the people from their tasks? Get to your labors. You're troublemakers. Enough demonstrations already. Go back to work. The people of the land are already so numerous, and you would have them cease from their labors. The same day Pharaoh charged the taskmaster, the foreman, you will no longer provide the people with straw for making bricks as before. Let them go gather straw for themselves. So what has he just done? He's doubled the workload, right? You have the same production quota, but now you have to go get your own materials. He's made it harder on them. Why is he doing that? Now think about this for a second. If what Pharaoh wants is pyramids and sphinxes and storehouses built, then you would do it in an efficient manner, right? What is the effect of taking away the straw? To not have the strength to rebel. But so what does that do to the quota? What does that do to productivity? Less productivity. Brian, you're a very bright economist. Why would I lower productivity if what I want is, I want my cities built? What's his goal here? One of the great questions that historians ask about the end of the Second World War was why Hitler was so keen on destroying Hungarian Jewry. Anyone here from Hungary? Anyone have refugee families that came from Hungary? Right? In the end of the war, when the Russians were already moving westward into Europe and the Allies were preparing to invade, and Hitler and the Allies were bombing the stuffing out of Germany, and Germany needed every bit of its resources to resist the Allied invasion and to withstand it and to solidify their empire. Hitler took trains away from the army, fuel away from the army, munitions away from the army for the sole purposes of liquidating Hungarian Jewry. And the son of a bitch who did it was Adolf Eichmann. Adolf Eichmann was a genius at one thing in the world. He was actually right at his trial. He never killed a Jew. He made train schedules. He could take these trains, move them all around Europe so that he had sufficient trains to liquidate 454,000 Hungarian Jews in Auschwitz. Hitler needed those trains to support the war effort. He needed the munitions. He needed the manpower. He needed the fuel. But he diverted it from the Russian front and from the Allies in order to do what? Kill Jews. Pharaoh wants pyramids built. By doubling the workload of the slaves, what do? You slow down the progress on your pyramid. So it turns out that's not what he wants. What does he want? Kill Jews. You have to understand what his motivation is here. Because from an economic standpoint, from a productivity standpoint, this move makes no sense at all. Like, why would you do that stupid move? We're making progress. But that's not what he really wants. That's not what he really wants. Why would he do that? Why does Hitler want to do that? Why did Hitler want to destroy Hungarian Jewry more than he wanted to push the Russians out of Poland? Because that was the war he was more interested in winning. Pharaoh is more interested in winning the war against his uprising slaves than he is in getting his cities built, you see? So don't give them straw, right? Impose upon them the same quota of bricks as they've been making before. Do not reduce it, for they are shirkers. And that's why they cry, let us go and sacrifice to our God. Let heavier work be laid on the men. Let them keep at it and do not pay attention to their deceitful promises. So the taskmaster, foreman, the people went, and they said to the people, thus says Pharaoh, I won't give you straw. You must go and get the straw yourselves wherever you can find it. There'll be no decrease in your work. And the people scattered through the land to gather stubble for straw, and the taskmasters pressed them, saying, you must complete the same work assignment each day. And the foremen of the Israelites, whom the Pharaoh's taskmaster set over them, were beaten. Why did you not complete the prescribed amount of bricks? You can't do it. You don't have the ability to do it anymore. Then the foreman came to Pharaoh and said, why have you done this? No straw is issued your servants. And they demand of us make bricks, and your servants are being beaten, and the fault is with your own people. He replied, you're shirkers. You're shirkers. What are shirkers? Nirfim. Nirafim, atem. You're nirpim. What's mazin nirpim? Yeah, chalash. You're weak. You're not really men. What kind of men are you? You're not really men. He's emasculating them, you see? He couldn't throw all the boys into the Nile. This is the alternative, right? He's trying to destroy their inner spirit, right? This is why you say, let us go and sacrifice be off to your work. The foremen found themselves in trouble. So the foremen stand between the taskmasters and the slaves, and they're the ones being pressed. You see how that works? And after they left Pharaoh's presence, I'm in verse 20 on page 340, they said, may the Lord look upon you and punish you for making us loathsome to Pharaoh. So what does Pharaoh succeed in doing? What did that move succeed in doing? In getting the foreman to turn against Moses and Pharaoh. If you want to undo a revolt, that's how you undo it. You can either co-opt the other side, or you can try to breed a wedge. So he creates a wedge issue between the leadership of the community and Moses and Aaron. And Moses and Aaron, may the Lord look upon you and punish you for making us loathsome to Pharaoh. So Moses is the first time Moses is going to face opposition from where? He expected to face opposition from Pharaoh. Where did he not expect to face opposition? From his own people. When was the last time he faced opposition from his own people? The last time, remember? When he killed the Egyptian, and the next day, you remember the story? And the next day he goes out and he sees two Israelites fighting, one guy beating the hell out of his friend, and he says, why are you killing your brother? And the guy looks up and he says, what, you make some, who made you chief over? What have you learned about this? It's really hard leading you Jews. It's really hard. But Moses, this is an inner sensitivity. That's why Moses had to lead. What's the inner sensitivity? He's able to deal with the resistance from Pharaoh. He expects it to come from there. Where does he not expect it to come from? From his brethren. If you're going to lead a revolt, what do you got to make sure? That we hold together. The way that you break the revolt is by wedging between among the rebels. Once they turn on each other, the revolt's finished. Right? Solidarity forever. In other words, he gets them to break the circle. That's the problem. And now Moses is beside himself. He knows how to deal with the opposition from Pharaoh. He doesn't know how to deal with the truth. He doesn't know how to lead. What's he been doing for the last 40 years? What's Moses been doing for the last 40 years? He's a shepherd. What's the difference between leading sheep and leading Jews? Which is harder? Sheep do what you tell them to. Jews? Right? Jews, not so much. Right? All right, you want to get political? Great question of last week's demonstration was, will that movement hold together or will it splinter? Is there going to be a united sort of resistance? All that word, it's very emotional. Will there be united resistance or is it going to break apart? Right? If the president really wanted to succeed, he'd be more strategic in what he was doing, and he could easily break that movement apart. Very easy because the seam lines are very clear within that movement. Within that last week's demonstration. We'll see what happens. It's going to be very interesting. Okay? This is one of the great questions of how you confront evil. But what happens now? Because he's lost faith. He's lost faith in himself. He doesn't know if he can do this. Pharaoh, I can confront. These people, I don't know. And that begins this week's Torah portion. So all of this, ladies and gentlemen, has been a long introduction. Sorry, it's a little loud.
I'm not comfortable with your comparison of Pharaoh with Hitler, because I believe that Pharaoh had an endgame of keeping the Jews to serve his purposes,
Yeah.
as opposed to the destruction of his labor force. So I think that the desire for power over Israel and to squash Moses is more akin, in my mind, to the scene in Ruth where after the king runs away and wants to keep his name, it's that control over his self-identity.
Yeah.
And is that pattern seen in the story where he gives him the other name and he resists.
Yeah.
I think that's the story here of Jewish identity and Jewish will, as opposed to trying to
Okay. Okay.
destroy them for your own purpose.
We could argue that, but your point of view is taken, is well taken. Right? It's an economically foolish move to take away the straw. It slows down the productivity.
Right? It would further an endgame of keeping them forever.
It would further an endgame keeping them forever, but I'm not sure that's really what Pharaoh wants. I mean, why did he enslave them to begin with?
So that they wouldn't be a threat.
They wouldn't be a threat to him, and to limit their population. Right? He doesn't want to exterminate them the way that Pharaoh, that Hitler does. What I'm suggesting is that sometime say, Mom, they got your name wrong. They used Dad's name for your name. But no, women lost their name when they achieved their MRS degree. That was the way of the world, right? Open up a magazine from 1958. Open up Good Housekeeping and look at all the ads on how to keep your man happy. Right? And it ain't Cosmo. Let me tell you. Right? And the pictures of June Cleaver and Marian Anderson and Harriet Nelson waiting at the door in heels and pearls with a pot. All the dinner came from one mom. And Mom waited. Dad came home at 5:30, 6 o'clock, whistling down hung up his briefcase and his hat. Hello, honey, I'm home. What's for dinner? Right? Pleasantville, remember? Wonderful scene in Pleasantville when William H. Macy comes up and nobody. Hello, I'm home. I'm home. Because into Pleasantville, into that world came Betty Friedan. And she looked like women. She looked like a woman, but she didn't talk like a woman. And all of a sudden, women said, wait, really? I can be a doctor, a lawyer, Supreme Court justice, president of the I can be me? This is the raising of consciousness. So this is also a story of the raising of consciousness. And there's an embarrassment about what I was. You mean, really? I can have my own satisfactions in life? That's not the only way. I mean, they're really interesting stories. Right? Many of you lived through it. Right? Now your daughters and granddaughters are living through it. Very interesting story. We haven't even gotten to the first one. Sorry, not. One line with both. Yes, right. Embarrassing. Been down so long seems like up to me. Yeah, in our house when we do our Pesach Seder, we do clips because my family's a video family. So we always show the clip from the movement. There's a holy movie in our family called The Matrix. And there's a scene in The Matrix where the liberator, his name is Morpheus, says to the liberator, Neo, you can take the blue pill or the red pill. If you take the blue pill, you'll discover who you really are, but it's going to hurt. You can take the red pill, you can live in your fantasy the rest of your life and it'll never bother you again. It's a really interesting question. I mean, do you want to know who you really are? Moses shows up, and one of the reasons they're angry at him isn't just because the straw gets taken away. kids in our school have live streamed classes with kids in Tel Aviv. That is, they get to school early in the morning. The kids in Tel Aviv stay late in the afternoon in their school, and they turn on a screen, a smartboard, and they have a common class. One teacher teaches both classes at the same time. Their world is a different world than your world and my world. They live in a very different world. The question is their sense of meaning different? Is their sense of relationship different? I grew up in a world where gay people didn't exist. You know, it was just a nasty joke if it was anything, right? I lived in a world where we never heard anything about them. We barely had anybody of color in our world. All of a sudden, we live in a world of stupendous diversity. We live in a very different world than our ancestors lived in, and we define meaning in very different ways. God comes to Moses, and what does he say? No. It's not that at all, Sid. It's not that. It said, I want you to understand that we're living in a different world. What you're about to experience, your ancestors never experienced because they never understood the world in these terms. You're about to see something you never could possibly imagine. Something you couldn't possibly imagine. And that's what's going on next. And Moses is trying to hang on because he's in between. He's the leader. And he has to explain this to people. And they can't understand. It's really hard to explain it. The world just isn't the way it used to be, Mama. The world's not the way it used to be, Papa. Watch. It's going to turn out okay. That's the kind of conversation. That's the conversation. We're going to have to finish this. It's really late. And Yossi's here. Larry and
My father grew up in a world of the Depression. He fought Hitler. He saw the birth of Israel.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a phrase that they call those people, and that's the greatest generation.
Yeah.
I don't know that me or my children can ever encounter the world that my parents did.
No.
And
And I don't know if we would have the courage to do it, by the way.
you know,
Or the
there's
self-sacrifice to do it.
I mean,
But they live, but you, so you, the question though is when you construct the narratives of your life, there are different narratives than constructed for your parents used for their life. You have different expectations of the world. You have different expectations for our children. Let's take a small thing, marriage. Don't raise your hands. But how many of you had grandparents or parents who had a miserable marriage, but they stayed together for 75 years because that's what you did? Don't raise your hand. I'm embarrassed. It's a whole different institution, marriage. We think about it in completely different terms than our ancestors did. Children, we think about kids in different ways, right? When I was a kid, like when you were a kid, you know, you graduated high school, you went to college. I got to go to college. By the end of college, the message was delivered to me, okay, what are you going to do? You got to get serious now. Find the woman you're going to live with,